SVB, for example, about a year before they failed, at BPI, they were a BPI member, they called me up and said, do you think if we signed up for the Fed's standing repo facility, that would be a method by which we could tell the Fed we're going to monetize all these treasuries and agency MBS that we're holding in order to satisfy our internal liquidity stress tests? And I talked to the Fed about this. And as we've seen now from the stuff that's been released, they were failing their internal liquidity stress test, even though they were awash in liquid assets, precisely because they didn't have a way to convert them into liquidity. And they weren't willing to go all the way to the discount window, but they were interested in the standing repo facility.
That's interesting.
Well, the answer I got back was no, that the Fed wasn't ready to go there yet. And so they didn't sign up because they didn't use the repo market, and it's expensive to establish the relationships that they would have needed to establish to count. So they just didn't sign up. And then, of course, on Wednesday, they tried to raise money by selling their available for sale securities rather than, say, using the standing repo facility. That brought market attention to their losses. They weren't able to raise capital. Thursday, the run began. Friday, their doors were closed midday, which is why the Fed had to take all these horrible moral hazard-inducing actions of bailing out all those uninsured deposits, of guaranteeing effectively the deposits around the banking system, of creating the awful bank term funding program, which made unsecured loans and did all kinds of things that central bankers aren't supposed to do, all because it wasn't possible to have an orderly failure. And that was because the Fed sent a negative message about being prepared to use the Fed's lending facilities. Now, I'm not saying, I emphasize this, I'm not saying Silicon Valley wouldn't have failed. Their losses were equal to their capital. And there's a very good chance that even if they had been able to raise liquidity, they would ultimately have failed.
Okay.
But it would have been orderly. Going back to my experience where I was more involved in the discount window and I saw it being used to get a small community bank that was in trouble on Wednesday to Friday so that it could be closed in an orderly fashion. That's the dirty little secret about the discount window. It's often used to lend to insolvent institutions so that there can be an orderly failure. Almost always those institutions are very small. So my view has always been no institution is too big to fail in a disorderly way. But every institution is effectively too big to fail in an orderly way. And so you need to be able to use those tools to support an orderly failure. And that's the kind of liquidity that simply needs to be reflected in the design of liquidity regulations.